Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome to another edition of Breaking Into Breaking Bad with Clifford and Caleb Humphrey. This is season 2, episode 3, Bit by a Dead Bee. Before we start, we're going to actually have a little brief synopsis since we realize that a lot of people aren't going to watch this show again. And so they're just going to listen to the podcast, which is totally fine. Maybe they saw the show a year ago, 10 years ago. But we wanted to give a brief synopsis of the episode so that everybody can get on the same page. Cabes, do you want to kind of review what happens in this episode?
Yeah. Just a side note, this was one of my favorite episodes. So it was fun to rewatch this one again. Yeah, so quick, 10,000 foot overview. It starts off exactly where it ended, with Walt and Jesse running away from where Tuco kept him captive, and they devised this plan to kind of cover their alibis. And the episode kind of just shows both Jesse's point of view and Walt's point of view on what they had to do, and then kind of the repercussions of their actions involving Walt's family, like Walter Jr. and Skyler, and just a lot of mixed emotions. If you remember this episode, you haven't seen it, but it's a whole lot to kind of unpack. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay, so as always, we start with kind of looking at the name of the episode, Bit by a Dead Bee. Any thoughts?
I honestly was talking to my wife Meredith about this, and because she remembers this episode pretty vividly also, and we just I couldn't get put my finger on it, to be honest. I'm sure if you say something that might be, might jog my memory a little bit, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, it's definitely an odd title, Bit by a
Mm-hmm.
Dead Bee. I mean, it's odd for a number of reasons. I mean, even a live bee doesn't bite you, right? It stings you, but a dead bee can't even do that. So the closest thing I could come up with was that the stories that they're telling are as plausible as saying I was bit by a dead bee.
I like it. Yeah. No, I didn't think of that. I like it. That's good.
Well, I don't know if that's what they were getting at, but that's the only thing I can come up with. So yeah, this whole thing is a bit of a stretch. What do we want to start off with as when we dive into the episode here?
Yeah, I mean, this episode kind of starts right from the beginning as opposed to the last episode where, you're seeing the car bounce and, bullets on the ground. So this one kind of starts right from the beginning, and
yeah.
I mean, you could tell that they've already come up with this plan, and I think this episode really showed that Walt and Jesse have kind of tiptoed from amateurs to getting a little bit better at this life, because it was the first time that Walt actually like really trusted Jesse after Jesse's all mistakes that he's made. He put a lot of faith in Jesse, to be honest, and especially after the last episode when Jesse kind of killed it with Tuco. But yeah, no, I think they covered everything. And it was
as
pretty
best they could.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty brilliant. I mean, even down to the making sure that Jesse said that they ate food from the vending machine instead of ordering from restaurants, so they know that they couldn't go back and look at video to see if they actually did go to those restaurants, and coming up with the alibi was pretty brilliant, I thought.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right to point out that this one does not begin like the others do with a kind of puzzling scene from something towards the end of the episode. And maybe that's because they want you to appreciate just how much of a fix they are in with this problem. How do they explain that Jesse's car was at the scene of this crime, this shootout with Tuco? And how do they explain that Walt was missing for a few days and doesn't have any reason, to explain why? They jump in with that. So there's when they hitchhike, Jesse says, "This is a bold plan, Mr. White. Are you ready for, but that led me to think this is still Walt's plan. I don't know if Jesse really had much to do with it. So
Right.
it shows Walt as being still the kind of lead guy, the
Mhm.
mastermind he's putting together right from the beginning. They don't both hitchhike together into town, even though they're probably really, thirsty and all of that, which would have been really easy to say, well, let's just both get into town and get something to drink and then we'll split up from there.
Right.
So they didn't just put a lot of thought into this, they were dedicated to the plan.
Mhm.
So something that comes up a couple times, I think 3 or 4 times at least in this episode, is a focus on this weird painting in Walt's hospital room.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to figure it out. So what's the painting? In the painting, there's a man on a rowboat
Right.
rowing from shore out to a larger, frigate of some kind, some large boat. And his wife and 2 kids are on the shore, and the wife is waving to him, and he's clearly leaving them, and he's heading out to the boat. And
Yeah.
it focuses on that painting a few
Mhm.
times. And again, I'm assuming that nothing's by accident here. So what is going
Right.
on in that painting that's supposed to make us, what does that symbolize? Any thoughts?
That was in the painting was in the psychiatrist's office, right? That's where he kind of
Well, okay. So
saw
so
it
here's
first.
I don't know if this made no sense to me. So at first I see it in Walt's hospital room, and then we see it in what looks to be the psychiatrist's room. And so it's either also in the psychiatrist's room, or they were staying in Walt's room the whole time. What might be the case is that they were moving from one to the other, and that maybe that painting's in both of them. I don't know. But if that's the case, that's even more strange because that means that this painting is in 2 places. But
Yeah.
let's say it's all the same room. Even still, the camera focuses in on it a few times, so
Hmm.
seems to be important. So it's a
Yeah.
man leaving his family, heading out toward something. What does the boat represent? His fortune, I guess, perhaps.
Yeah.
Adventure. I'm not sure, but he's
Well,
he's leaving.
he when he you know when he finally comes to terms with talking to the psychiatrist on patient confidentiality, that's kind of when he looks at it and kind of just opens up. And
Hmm.
you like he did fib a little bit, like he just wanted to get out of there and didn't mention like, oh, he was forced out. But I think everything that he was saying was like there was a lot of truth to it,
Yeah,
like
right. He was very
he
honest.
yeah, and he wanted to, just finally open up because he hasn't, other than Jesse, there's no one else that he's been able to talk to about this, So I think it was a pretty emotional part for him because he's faking the crying when Skylar and Walt Jr. come in, and you could tell that they're just kind of over it also, but like they miss him because it's the family. But like, kind of go back to your point of the painting, it's definitely pulls at your strings because he's in a situation right now where he is like kind of torn, like continuing this lie that's just getting deeper and deeper,
Right.
or looking back at shore this family. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I think maybe it shows the man who's conflicted by his commitments.
hmm
So, on one hand, he's committed to his family, right? And we know that from the very beginning, that was his motive. I'm doing this for my family. It's all for them. On the other hand, there he is in the hospital room talking to Jesse, and he's saying, when can we cook again?
yeah, what's changed, Jesse?
What's changed,
Oh
right?
man.
Like he's committed more and more and more to that thing at the expense of his family. Whereas before it
hmm
was he was committed to that insofar as it helped his family. Now it's sort of a zero sum game, right? He can only benefit one and harm the other. So you're right that he's getting all of his lies are catching up to him, and it's becoming harder and harder and harder to balance them all. But I think
yeah
that painting really represents his departure from his family, even while he tells himself he's doing it all for his family.
Right. And if you think back at all the other episodes, when something went awfully wrong after they, decided to cook meth, there was such a 180 turn, like, oh, we're not doing this anymore, just like we're gonna go back to our ways, and then they kind of creep back. But for this one, they were almost killed or kidnapped into Mexico, never to be seen again. And yet this time he's saying what's changed,
That's right.
so like,
That's right. Yeah.
I think this is why I think this episode is really important, because it's a step into Heisenberg and a step away from Walt.
Yeah, that's a good point. So last time when they were caught up in having to deal with the murder of Crazy Eight and disposing of the body, after that, remember Walt was like, "Oh no, I'm done. Like I can't believe we did this.
No more bloodshed.
No more violence." Yeah, and he was ready to give up on it. And here, that's gone. There's no sort of like, well, maybe we're in over our heads. Maybe this is not a good idea. That seems to be gone. So again, his commitment to this thing is stronger than ever. And here's the other thing: without Tuco, who are they going to sell their meth to?
Right.
Has he even thought about that yet?
No. Yeah, I mean, they
Because
needed
establishing,
because they needed to sell it on a wholesale
right
level. So
now, maybe they've got faith that there's going to be someone that's going to fill the vacuum. But remember what it cost them last time to establish the connection with Tuco, right? Jesse got his face beat in, and Walt had to go in and blow the office up of Tuco and risk his life and all of that. So
yeah,
doesn't seem to be a concern for him though. Okay, a couple other things. Hank. So Walt asks, "How's Hank?" And someone says, "Oh, Hank, he's indestructible." I'm trying to remember who says that, but someone says that's how Hank is. He's indestructible. Maybe that was Gomi. I'm not sure, but
yeah,
but I think that's probably an apt description of Hank, right? He's kind of a goofball in a lot of ways, but he's also a force to be reckoned with.
Right. You don't underestimate him, but he's also a guy of just witty sayings. Like what was the first thing he said when he came in? It was like, "Oh, the mark of the beast," pertaining to a gift that Marie had dropped off.
Right.
He's very quick with those sayings. But you're right. Like, I mean, he handled himself pretty solid against Tuco in the last episode. So
yeah, right. No, completely by the book training, calm, collected. Doesn't seem to have been put off by it at all. Okay, then Badger's back. Badger's probably my favorite character, I gotta say.
Yeah. The last time we saw him, he was running towards the with his crossbow towards the RV.
Yeah,
and
right. Jesse left him in the desert, so I was amazed that we see him again here with Jesse helping him out. Now he does say, "Hey, we're cool now. You do owe me though, because last time you kind of left me in the desert." So Badger's back, and Jesse does owe him a lot, and now Jesse owes his cousin who towed the RV for them $500, and we know Jesse doesn't have. So Jesse's already living on borrowed time. But anyway, so Badger's back, and he's taking care of the RV for him. We'll see what happens with that.
Right.
One thing on Skyler, when he's being evaluated and the doctor says, "Walt, I understand that you've been stressed out a lot." And Walt says, "No, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm not stressed out." And Skyler says, No, that's to put it mildly. Like, you've been really stressed out, Walt. And on one hand, that's true. On another hand, she can't really know the things that are stressing him out. So she's projecting a lot. She's saying, well, if I were in his shoes and I had to put up with the cancer and the treatment and the job and, and all of that, then that would make me, Skyler, very stressed out. And I'm going to project that onto Walt. But it was another sort of instance of her, I don't know how to put it, kind of putting her safetyism worldview of things kind of onto Walt, whereas Walt's got a lot of things on his mind that are bothering him, but the things that she thinks are stressing him out, those things aren't really stressing him out. Right. The things that he's stressed out
Yeah.
about is sort of like, is someone going to find out that Jesse and I are doing this thing, that, that I killed this guy, that, she has no idea. Right. And then this kind of came out too in that weird scene where Walter Jr. is like, Dad, make sure you drink your apple juice. And he's like, no, I'm good, son. He's like, no, Dad, the nurse said you got to stay hydrated, drink the apple juice, reminded me of the veggie bacon a little bit, like
Yeah.
everybody telling Walt what to do for what's good for him, and he's like, I don't want to do it,
Right. I got to think that this came from a place of Walt Jr. just being, overly scared and not knowing really what to think. 'Cause what was the diagnosis?
Yeah, of course.
A temporary
global amnesia of some kind.
Yeah, but it will not happen again. It was a one-time thing.
Oh yeah, right. Absolutely not going to happen again. Yeah.
Yeah. And you could tell Skylar just is not buying it. She's half like, glad that he's home, but also half like, what is going on with you? Like
Right.
he
She's
has
definitely
no
losing
idea.
patience with him. Yeah. Another thing that came out in this episode twice, once with Hank, another with Gomi, was that Jesse doesn't have it in him to shoot Tuco. And so they rule that out. Well, there's no way that
Right.
this guy shot Tuco.
Mhm.
So we can let him go. And I think that shows two people underestimating Jesse, right? So there's not a lot to praise Jesse for, but we can definitely say he's showing more courage, and we
Mhm.
saw
Absolutely.
instances of it.
Yeah, he
And
took a big step, I think, today on this episode, like a big giant step. Like every task that he was given prior, with getting the plastic bin for the bodies and just everything. He was never able to really think on his own. And this one, he
Mhm.
literally had to be grilled by Hank and Gomi, and he had to think on his toes, and he handled it pretty well.
Right,
Um,
right.
Even
Yeah,
when they
and
brought
have
in Salamanca with the bell.
right. Yeah, that was good. I liked how
Mhm.
how Gomez said, "Look, this guy's an old, Mexican cartel guy. They
Yeah.
live by a code, which is that you never help the feds. It doesn't matter how
Mhm.
personal your resentment against somebody might be, you never help the
Exactly.
feds."
Right.
And of course, he shows them exactly what he thinks of them there in the office
Oh.
by releasing himself, relieving himself there in the office. But
Oh, brutal.
another thing I wanted to point out, when Walt's with the psychiatrist and he understands how the patient confidentiality thing works, and he's confident enough, he then, like, at first we think he's actually going to come clean here. He's just going to tell the guy.
Mhm.
And he could have. I think he could have, but he doesn't. He makes up a whole different alibi.
Right.
And what you see here is this is a play within a play, or he's putting on an act within an act, right? This
Mhm.
is something that Shakespeare actually does a number of times in his plays, where the characters are putting on a play, and it's just sort of like a deeper layer to what's going on in the larger, on the surface.
Mhm.
So it's an opportunity where Walt can be truthful, but he can also mix in lies to that story, because he's writing his own script then as the character, not as an actor, right? As the character, he's putting on this play. And so, as you pointed out already, he mixes in a lot of honesty, because he is frustrated with how things are. His son with cerebral palsy, his wife with an unexpected pregnancy, and his being an extremely overqualified chemistry teacher, in which he's had to see all of his colleagues surpass him.
Yeah.
And then he is still convinced he's going to be dead in 18 months. So that those things are all true, but he still says that, what he did was just needed to get out of the house. On one hand, that was, it was expedient, because it helped him convince the psychiatrist, like, look, dude, there's nothing really wrong with me here. I just needed to get some space. And I made up
Right.
this story, because I needed to be able to get back in with my wife, and, and all of that. And I thought that was clever, right? I think the psychiatrist basically says, okay, there's nothing really wrong with this guy. and he's not likely to have another fugue state or whatever.
Right.
And it's the most honest I think that we've seen Walt be. But it's interesting that even when he had the opportunity to be completely honest, he didn't. I mean, the guy makes the condition. Like, the only thing I can tell is if you say I'm going to kill someone, then I have a right to tell that one person only.
Right. It was a really powerful speech. I felt like that he gave, because it, you know, like we're saying, it wasn't the whole truth, but the battle that has kind of led him to the place where he's at now in life was kind of spilling out in that meeting. Like, he didn't just now start having anger issues with his peers surpassing him. That's already happened. And he probably thinks of them as not as smart or as equipped as he is either. And so that was probably more telling. So to me, this was him getting to throw up a little bit of the how he was before Heisenberg,
Right.
and that's why I thought it was pretty powerful speech he said.
Yeah. But still interesting that he doesn't tell the actual truth.
Right.
And why? Not sure. Maybe he still believes that what he's doing is so egregious that he still can't really face it himself. Okay, a critical part in this episode, is when Walt realizes that he's got the money and the revolver left in a
Yep.
box open in his room, in the nursery back at home. And so he has to sneak out of the hospital, take a bus, I guess, to
Yep.
his home. And then he has to hide the money and the gun. And while he's there, Skylar wakes up and Walter Jr. wakes up, and he looks in on them, right? He pokes his head out while they're in the kitchen. And I think his face gets really forlorn.
Yes.
And it seemed to me he was almost looking at his family as though he were already dead. This is what it would look like. Life would go on. He wouldn't be there. They'd be doing these kinds of things, but he wouldn't be able to participate in their life. And in a way, and this is what's creepy, is he's alive and he's already not able to participate in their life because of the actions that he's been taking.
Right. I mean, it was definitely a sad look that he gave. So know that he was feeling some kind of emotion. Like, I don't know if that was just him, allowing his conscience to kind of creep in a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, like seeing them, and obviously you could tell that they're still not overjoyed, like, but yeah, it was definitely, I mean, it was quick, he got right back. And when he goes to the bus stop, he looks up and then he sees the have you seen missing,
missing
Walter White.
person. Yeah.
So I think that kind of tugged on his heartstrings for a millisecond, and then back to the hospital and just jabs that needle right in his hand again. And
Oof. It's rough. Okay. The other thing was, let's see, Hank's gift from his staff. Right? He gets Tuco's diamond, maybe grill.
Yep.
Silver grill that went over his teeth, encased in some kind of container thing. On one hand, it's sort of like a trophy, right, for a kill, which is very dark. But when he pulls it out and shows Walt in Walt's hospital room, Walt is disgusted and he turns away. Maybe he would do that for any person, but the fact that he knew Tuco and had been in close contact with him maybe made it all the more gruesome for him, because he knew the person who, to whom those teeth belong.
And he was in the middle of putting on a solid performance of, I am so sorry, I can't believe this happened to me, like, he's just building this ginormous lie, and he's just playing the part. And then to bring up the Tuco part was almost like oh crap, yeah, man, that was pretty intense.
Right.
Got to get back to this.
He does say, Walt says in the hospital when Hank there, he says, "I'm so sorry that you had to, that you encountered this Tuco guy while you were looking for me." And it occurred to me, wait a minute, how does Walt know that? Doesn't Walt just Wouldn't Walt assume that he came across Tuco in the line of duty, like they were doing a drug bust and they found Tuco? Like, did someone tell him, "Oh, well, Hank was out looking for you and he was following this lead with this Jesse Pinkman guy, and then he came across," like, we'd have no reason to know that that happened.
Right. I think it's just kind of assumed that that was the because I mean I can't think of any other way that Walt would say that without
Hmm.
you know being told. Because the first thing that Walter Jr. says is like he tells him all about the shootout with Hank, and so
Right, right, right.
um,
Another reason for us to think that Walter Jr. is super impressed with Uncle Hank, less
mhm.
impressed with the "make sure to drink your apple juice" dad. Okay, well, then at the end of the episode, when when Walt's trying to get back in with Skylar, he makes this attempt to be funny, right, by getting naked and pretending to go to the Quickie Mart or whatever, and it doesn't really land. It's not a really funny joke. He's trying to be,
Right.
but especially since we know that he wasn't actually in a fugue state, it's not funny.
Right.
But Skylar doesn't think it's funny either.
Hmm.
And then she asks him the second cell phone question, and he's completely caught off guard.
Right. He did not know what to do.
Yeah. So all of his calculations did not include that.
And the way that I mean, Skylar was already suspicious of it, and the way that he responded, I think, just solidified her thinking of, okay, he's hiding something. Like
Right. Right.
this was too obvious that answered the way you did.
Yeah. So we're left not knowing how things are going to go
Hmm.
with them, but it seems as though Skylar is not buying it, and going forward, that's going to limit the degree to which Walt is able to put things back together at home.
Right.
And and the point is that it seems at any point he could stop right now and focus all his energy on trying to fix things, but he keeps moving forward, committed to that, whatever that ship represents in the painting. So, Cabes, you mentioned that this is one of, if not maybe the favorite episode of yours. What is it about this episode that's so good, that's better than the others?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's the favorite, but as far as the beginning stages, the first, two seasons, I think this one was special because it really shows the full crossover between amateur Walt and Jesse and semi professional Walt and Jesse.
Mm.
Because I mean, if you take Jesse from episode 1 to now, he's failed so much that he has learned how to handle himself. And same thing with Walt. Like Walt was probably not the best at coming up with a story like that. And so um,
Yeah,
this to me, this was just a really big step for their characters in what they are trying to become.
that's an interesting point. So it takes a while to learn how to be good at being bad. And what we're seeing is a development in their progression of becoming good, bad guys. Well, we'll leave it there and pick up next time with episode 4 of season 2. You want to remind people about
Yeah, as
our Patreon
always, if you
account?
haven't subscribed to the channels and you want to also look at the Patreon account for some bonus content and a lot of fun stuff we're doing there, please do so. And yeah, we'll get to the next episode here.
All right. And we'll see everybody next time.